have a pleasure talking to a true visionary in the realm of IT strategy and design. Uh, I would say an accomplished enterprise architect with a wealth of experience in sculpting digital landscapes for the organization and for its success. That's the fantastic introduction I could make for you. And
Thank you, Shubhat, for having me.
It's a
It's a
pleasure.
pleasure.
And honestly, let's jump on to the questions. Got a lot of
Sure.
queries in my head, which would enable the listeners to understand what is enterprise architect as a role, and if anybody wants to pursue it, how would the individual go ahead, follow the path, understand what are the challenges and what are the success. Yeah. So, without a further ado, my first question would be to you. Can you provide an overview of what enterprise architecture entails and its significance in today's rapidly evolving landscape? What's your view over here?
Yeah. First of all, I think the enterprise architect is one of the most underrated roles. However, I think it's very crucial because a good architect can be the difference between a stable and robust enterprise and the one that fails very often, right? Now, people often confuse the role of an enterprise architect, right? Because if you see enterprise architect or rather architects can be divided into three subcategories. One, you have solution architects who are more oriented to a specific product. Let's take RPA, like you have UiPath, automation, UI, Blue Prism, stuff like that, who know the product very well. They become a solution architect. And then you have the business architect as well, who understands the business very well. For example, what's required for the business, what's important to them, and how that should connect to end systems. And then you have the legacy architect or the cloud architects, more of the infra guys. So you are in the middle, right? As an enterprise architect, you sit in the center who connects the solution architects and your infra architects together to create an overall solid enterprise structure. So that's your role. So you are a BA, you are a kind of a developer, you are kind of a visionary, and you have to sit with all of them and get everything together. So enterprise architect is a very important role. And to get started on this, I think the best way would be to actually get your hands dirty on both sides, both in the infrastructure part of it and in the BA part of it and the tool part of it, so that you know what are the tool capabilities, what are the limitations, etc. And then you build your role. And definitely try finding a mentor because it can make your life way easier. Because there are stuff you would read in the books, Google it, it just won't happen unless and until you find someone, a mentor of yours, who would be able to guide you. Throughout my career, I had several mentors, both from the business side, like Prasad Natu, who was with me with ITC Infotech. I have Satyanarayan Das at PepsiCo. People like that, Shavana Sasta, who works at ITC Infotech, who used to work at ITC Infotech. He's a part of a company called Tiger Analytics right now, but he was very good in supply chain management. So these all people and Vipul Mishra. So all these people give these inputs together, and over a period of time, you start building your structure like small Lego blocks for an entire journey.
Perfect. So, I was pretty sure that I'm talking to a hands-on person, and for sure an architect who is really grounded, knows what's the value of getting trained, and also has a learning curve. So I think the next question is going to give us more value, and that's where I'm hinting at. How would you approach aligning the IT strategies with an organization's overall business objectives and goals when you have a particular application to be rolled out, or a particular technology to be rolled out? How would you approach it, Abhishek?
Yeah. So in the world of enterprise architecture, primarily there are two big players. One is Zachman, another is TOGAF. The TOGAF stands for the Open Group Architecture Framework, right? So essentially, if you see, TOGAF is very much process oriented. Like it's like COBOL, Fortran, C. It tells you the process, tells you exactly what to do. Whereas Zachman is more flexible. Now the point is, you can get certification in both, but I would recommend going for TOGAF because about the Fortune 500 companies, I am TOGAF certified myself in 9.2 version. So if you get certification, people start taking you more seriously. Also, the point is, I think you should get a certification after having at least a decade or maybe 12 years or 13 years of experience. Because even if you learn that, TOGAF is very much non-technical in nature. If you see the entire documentation, the books that we have, even Archimate also for that matter. But if you are not able to relate to what you have done in your past, TOGAF won't make sense to you. So you have to understand what people are saying, because there are several things like there is a model, it's called BDAT, it's business, data, applications, and technology. So what happens is that you have to understand that business comes first. If you have certain implications, hey, this is my tool, and you ask business to do it, they will not. You have to have a proper change management procedure. So you have to be a hands-on person who has seen these challenges, understand how business responds to certain queries, questions, or resistance, and then try to overcome it. So I think getting a TOGAF certification is pretty important to be an enterprise architect, but I would recommend you doing it at least after 10 to 12 years of being a hand-on architect as a solution guy or a business analyst guy. So that would be my thoughts.
So if you have a good deal of experience, and good deal is equal to a decade years of experience, and you also are certified in TOGAF, I think TOGAF will give you an idea or a path ahead which would help you align IT strategies very well with an organization's objectives, is because there are some laid methodologies that you spoke about which, if followed to the T, would help you deliver it. Is my summary correct?
Absolutely. I mean, see, just to add to what you said, there is something called Hell's Law, right? What it
Yes.
states is that you start simple and then you build up. And that applies to both your level of learning and as an enterprise architect as well. So imagine if I give somebody like maybe with 10, 15 years of experience, who has not done a TOGAF certification to build an architecture, he or she would be all over the place. But if you know the TOGAF framework, it tells you what are the essential building blocks, where you should start, what are the different roles, who should be responsible, where you should tier your systems, where you should draw the DMZ, right? And obviously keep the three keywords, the holy trinity in mind. It's always people, process, and technology in that correct order. It's very important. It's people first, then process, then technology. You switch it the other way, things will go wrong. Make sure you're good with your people before you move on to the other two.
Absolutely. I think the mantra is right. If you get your people correct, the process will fall in place. And if you
Yeah,
have these two points corrected and correlated, technology enablement is just a cake. It's like a piece of cakewalk, is what I would say,
yeah,
or I would say a sweet cake to have.
yeah.
Otherwise, it's a mess.
Yeah, like we started our career in development, right? You know how it
Yes,
is. So imagine now you can just write an algorithm, you can push it in Copilot, and then it will get a code for you. So writing code isn't a big skill anymore, I would say. But yeah, like you said, having the algorithms in place, understanding the business exceptions, the people who do that process as a BAU operations, understanding their pain points is really important, man.
perfect. Now, I think we spoke about delivery now, whilst we were answering this particular question. Now let's come to a real world example where uh, you have done a complex technology integration, and whilst doing that, I'm 100% sure you would have got the success. But we want the listeners to know that there are challenges also during this particular integration. And I'm for sure you'd be glad to share that with us, so that if in case anybody is facing those challenges, they know what are the fixes that are available or that could be looked at. So, share a real example along with some
Sure.
challenges that you faced. Yeah.
Sure. So I think although there are many and there are certain complex ones that I'm working on right now, but just to keep the privacy part of it, I will give you an example that I've done in my past. So
Mm.
I was with ITC Infotech, it's one of the largest FMCGs here in India, and I've been proud to be associated with it, right? So essentially, generally, you know how it happens, right? The business teams comes in, they say, hey, we have a process, we need it to be automated. Can you work with us on that? So what happens is that you essentially assign a BA, and then you start understanding the process and you start doing it. But
Mm.
here is the catch. The point is, there are certain elements which cannot be captured in a tool like process mining tool like Celonis, and other tools like those, like Signavio is there. I think Fortress IQ was there a couple of years back. It
Yeah.
still is. But the point is, see, you have to first of all, you as an enterprise architect should know what are the capabilities of the tool itself. Take example of Celonis. I have personally see Celonis fail in multiple places because Celonis works very well in a SAP environment where your end and downstream applications are completely SAP oriented. Your process, although it's fragmented, but it is still connected in somehow. But getting value out of Celonis is very difficult unless and until you have everything mapped out, which is very difficult. So while I was working with ITC Infotech, there are so essentially we work on a hub and spoke model. So what a hub is a main distribution center, and you have
Yeah.
spokes that come out of it, and you distribute your property or your merchandise through there. So while we were trying to automate the processes both at the hub and the spoke level, what happened was essentially that those people who were working there, we were creating something called an e-way bill. What an e-way bill is gives you the right to permit through go through different states while you're transporting your merchandise, right?
Yeah.
And that e-way bill needs to be created as soon as the truckers come in, picks up their inventory, and goes out on the road. But you have to understand, and I would think this is very important, real digital transformation begins at the ground level. Do visit, if you are a person who is into digital transformation, do not sit behind a desk because you will only get about 50% of the story. You need to go to a warehouse, see how things work, understand, talk to people, everyone from the person who is the head or the guy who's in charge of the warehouse to the person who is a trucker driver. Because I realized that when I went to those warehouses, that these truckers come in, they wait for the e-way bill, and that is the only short break they get where they get their food, drink water, go to the restroom and come back. So essentially, I think at that point in time, it was very, they wanted the e-way bill to be denied or taking time because that would actually give them rest. So although we were pushing for efficiency, process optimization, e-way bill at the right time, getting it first time right, they didn't want it. So you cannot force digital transformation. So we realized that, hey, let's do something. Uh, Let us try to automate it during dark hours. So once the truckers come in, we can hand them the bill. But no, even that won't work because you need to be assured that the truck is in working condition before it again goes out to the field. So those are the kind of different challenges that you have. I would recommend everyone who is in digital transformation to go to a warehouse, go to an actual factory, see what's going on, understand the pain points, right? And in fact, I would recommend using a Six Sigma methodology also. It's called failure mode effect analysis. What you create is that what you essentially do is you do a calculation of something called a RPN or a risk probability number. That's a product of severity into occurrence into detection. And then any process you bring it or you kind of modularize into sub processes, right? And then you find out which is more important. So that risk probability number will tell you how risky the process is. So before you hail into digital transformation and completely overhauling the entire process, make sure you break a big process into sub processes, talk to people, do a voice of customer, do a 5-why analysis, and then try to optimize that process instead of just going and, hey, we can automate this. It's not going to work. Trust me.
Absolutely right. So, and I think that's where I relate to the post which Pascal had made in LinkedIn of the iceberg. When you're at the top of the iceberg, you know only 3% of the problems, but at the bottom of the iceberg, there are 97% of the problems which often get
Absolutely.
overlooked. And I think when you're doing an implementation of a technology or any particular tool that is coming in, if you don't know what's happening at the bottom, okay, you might just build a superficial product or introduce a superficial technology. And as you rightly said, PPT, you miss people, you will miss the process. It's because if
Yeah.
people are not interested in getting the
Yeah.
e-way bill,
I mean, people
the
will
process
start
is
treating
not
you
going
as a
to
threat.
work.
People start treating you as a threat, right? Oh, these guys are here to automate us because you won't understand the trucker's problem, right? They have been on a
Yeah.
journey the entire night. The e-way bill is the only rest time they get, so they want it to be delayed. Like I said, it's very important to we get that those people factors and human factors involved in the process. So that's pretty important.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I think this was the best example that didn't speak a lot about technology introduction, but yes, spoke about RPA, which is a good I would say an algorithm or a theorem that you should look at when you're delivering technologies. Look at PPTs, not the PowerPoints, but people, process, and technology,
Yeah,
and
absolutely, man.
ensure you work at the ground. My next question was, in a world where technology is constantly evolving, okay? how would you ensure the architecture that you're designing remains adaptable, uh, future proof, and sustainable?
Mhm. See, there is a famous, I think it's called Martek's law. So it says that technology grows exponentially, but people grow in arithmetic progression, right?
Yep.
So the main thought is to, there is a shock factor, right? If you imagine, I'm talking like 10 years back, the first time we saw automation, we thought, hey, this is magic, man. What's going on? And people were surprised. There is always an element of fear. Hey, we are going to lose our jobs, this and that. But ultimately, people adapt it, people change, people think, people realize, right? For example, I'm from aviation maintenance background, and now I'm into this. Even with AI, I see a lot of people saying that, hey, people are going to lose their job, this and that. But that's not going to happen, right? Unless and until you let technology go ahead of yourself and you are not adapting, it's always going to be your slave. And if you use it efficiently, I think it's going to help you grow in your career as well. So the important part again is change management. I think change management is a very significant process. Proper communication. What's your goal again? Because generally, if you see, if I have been in the service side of things and I've been in a product company as well. Generally, when any kind of innovation comes in our IT world, uh, people think of how to lay off people, reduce jobs. That's a very wrong thing to do. Don't do it. I mean, come on. Unless and until you have a plan for those resources, whom you are going to replace with technology or any kind of automation, this is not the right thing to do. I mean, come on. It's ethically and morally incorrect as well. So I think we should be very cautious as to how we inherit technology, how we implement it in our systems, and before all of that, again, I go back to the Trinity. It's people, process, technology. Think about what you're going to do with the people whose capacity you're going to utilize or you're going to replace with automation. Make sure you have a plan for them. And that is where the role of HR, change management, communication, steer co all comes in, ensuring that you have a safe ecosystem. I think I would like to take the example of Zerodha. It's a kite. They are a great company doing, kind of,
Yep.
they're a e-broker, right? I mean, they also have technology. They can do a bunch of stuff, but their founder Nikhil Kamath said a fantastic thing that we are not going to let any of our guys lose their job to technology. I think that is the kind of model we should go through, and that's really appreciative.
Okay. So that's covering the entire aspect of people and process. Okay. But I'm still jumping onto the same question again from a
Mhm.
technology perspective. Okay. And getting into a little technical. How would you ensure the architecture is sustainable? Yes, the people aspect, the process aspect needs to be taken care of, and that's well explained. But from a technology perspective, is there something or is there any mantra that you could share with the listeners which would help
Yeah, I
them
think
think about a sustainable architecture?
sure. See, again, I mean, things have changed. Right now, most of the entire architecture that we see, it's on cloud. So
Yes.
the good part about cloud is that you can just plug and play. You don't like something, you can move out. But it is always recommended to have a multi-vendor strategy or a multi-cloud strategy. So, for example, let me put it this way. You might have, let's say, uh, AWS Panorama. Okay, it's Azure on your edge servers, but you might have proper Azure for inferencing on your non-edge places. For example, let's say I have a factory that's very remote. I need edge computing. I might have AWS Panorama over there, whereas I might have Azure on my inference or my headquarters or offices. In that way, what happens is that although it's a problem sometimes because you are on multiple clouds, you have multiple issues, multiple instances running, but I think you actually cross train your team and you have the leverage or the option to switch to a different vendor so that any of the vendors cannot hold you hostage on their specific technology set, right? So make
Yeah.
sure while you designing an enterprise architect, as an enterprise architect, you create a modular design where you can just plug and play. For example, in computer vision, right? You have this lot of CV algorithms that are very nice, fine for labeling and inferencing. You have label right. You have multiple tools, but make sure that you are designing your architecture in such a way that if time comes, you shouldn't be stuck with one vendor because that's bad for you as a person, as an architect, and that's bad for your organization as well. So make sure you're able to switch out, your models, switch out your vendors at a quick notice with a proper change management. I think that would be the mantra. Be flexible.
Perfect. I think that was the crux, and I think the key takeaways would be have a modular architecture, plug and play easily. You could just plug it out, play. That's how you should have a flexible architecture. Look at a multi-vendor strategy. That's the second point. Also, when you're deploying the architecture or design, think about your end users. Like you spoke about the factory and what sort of a technology you would use. I think these, if you if a person would think about these three essentials, I think you would start with a good architecture design for sure. Now,
Yeah.
when's your
In
building
fact,
this?
just to add
Yeah,
to that, I think I'll add one more thing. It's very important because in the design phase itself, generally when I draw or create an architecture diagram, there are three parts. It's conceptual architecture, logical architecture, and physical architecture. So while you are creating the conceptual architecture diagram itself, you are putting in certain components. Let's say a compute instance, it might be an EC2 for compute and S3 for storage, or it might be a B series VM for Azure. So make
yeah.
sure in your conceptual diagram itself you have multiple copies where you create one-to-one replica of components which can be replaced, so that when time comes and even when you are not in charge, someone can just go back to your architectural diagram and say, hey, this is where the problem lies, let us swap this. So do it at the design thinking phase itself. That's pretty important.
Conceptual architecture design is where we mess up a lot. And then that is where the logical architecture keeps failing. And if these two fail, physical architecture goes on a toss. Yes, there are many other factors which contribute, like cost and risks. But primarily, if your conceptual architecture is not in place, things don't fly. Absolutely right. Now, as an EA, for sure, you're just not going to play with technology. You're going to talk to various stakeholders, which include business leaders, IT team members, and external partners. Do you think collaboration is a key in enterprise architecture?
Oh yes, it is definitely. And I think there is a mantra here. One of my gurus taught me, and I will quote it over here. It's that don't overcommit and underdeliver. Okay, that's pretty important. So essentially, the saying goes like this: don't commit when you are happy. Don't go to an argument when you are sad, because both of that will have bad results. So I think it's always good. And I will tell you a very fancy story. Right, a long time back, there was multiple people who were selling eggs on the Thames River, right? I mean, one of the so essentially the eggs were of the same price, and people were confused as to whom to buy from because all of the eggs are of the same price. So there was one kid who said, "Hey, mom, let me sell the eggs. Why? Because my hands are small and the eggs will look larger. So that would give you an USP." So essentially, what I'm trying to say is that when you sell as an enterprise architect as well, when you're part of pre-sales or inside sales, make sure you do not overcommit. Always undercommit. If you can, let's say there's an IDP solution, it can give you 98% accuracy. Say that you can give 90% and then work it up from there. It's always good to undercode and then show improvement rather than overcommitting and then underperforming. That would be the mantra.
I don't need to summarize this one. This is a nail on the head. Be very critical when you're committing, when you're collaborating with a larger group. And with that, I think we covered people, we covered process, we covered technology, and this is very close to my heart. And I am also scared with this particular concern, and the concern is security. How do you balance the need for innovation and agility, uh, but at the same time ensuring cybersecurity being in place? How do you balance this, man?
I see again. There is also a saying, right? I mean, it's not more of a saying, it's more of a mantra for enterprise architects. And I think I would rather put it on my head as a bumper sticker. It's very important. A good design architect will design architecture, and the question is not that whether it will fail or not, but whether the failure is survivable or not. That is very important. See, your architecture might fail, and it will fail when you start. There are certain times you will not be able to envisage everything, what might happen, what might not happen. But ideally, you should. In case you are not, you will fail. But API is secured, are your API is whitelisted. Certain large organizations have identity access management tools like CyberArk, SailPoint. stuff like that. And obviously we have CM and SO tools, which are for surveillance of your mails coming in, mail traffic going out. And I think again, the best crux of it is your people well trained? Because you can have $1 million budget on cybersecurity. All it takes is one mail, one clickbait, one employee just clicking on one mail to get access to your system. So training your employee, and I think some of the fascinating facts I've seen over a period of years is that some of the large organizations kind of do a internal testing where they actually send you a mail on purpose to see whether you are aware enough of the security policies. And if they see that you are the weak link, you are clicking on a link that's not secure, they're going to come school you, train you, make sure that you understand the difference between something secure and not secure. So again, the people training part is very important, and obviously the tech part is there. So yeah.
Yep. I think you touched on the I think you touched on the right end, where even if you build a secure technology, you ring fence it, you design it, and you got the best of the architecture in play. It's still the people and the process which really hurts you, and that is where the training needs to be done. And I'm glad I'm part of a company which really focuses a lot on security, trains every individual, does this mock drills, or dip checks, so that we secure the best at the bottom end. Okay, so that when the attack happens, we can close it at the end, at the funnel itself, rather than letting it flow upwards. So absolutely bang on. And with this, you also spoke about data storage, and that is where the next question was popping up into my head was, whilst you're doing the architecture design, the end output is going to be data, and data is a valuable asset. It's an oil, is what we all keep talking about. Uh, but how do you approach data management and governance in your architectural design? Does it really play a major role in architectural design?
Yeah, absolutely. Because see, you can have a zero trust architecture, right? It'll zero trust. So if you have a zero trust security policy, you will be able to kind of bar away people who are trying to get access at a device level. But if there is a human reengineering involved, how are you going to stop it? Second, you have to also understand what kind of data, what is the purpose of the data, how important is the data. So let me put an example. If you have, again, if you have any company confidential data that's trade secrets, you are supposed to have backup copies on an active configuration on your database, right? So if like both
Yeah.
the servers are hot, you can call it at a moment's notice. If you have something like a payroll data that's sensitive, yeah, but it's not that important for that matter compared to company secrets. It can be in an active passive configuration where a few hours delay is acceptable. So stuff like that, that's how you configure yours in an active or active passive configuration. And then the important part is the security layer on top of it, which is pretty much standard everywhere. So I'm not going to talk much about it. But I think the essential, I would say the summary of it would be that with data, the problem is that now if you see, it data doesn't more, for example, if you see a S3 instance, it can charge you on the amount of data you store. But if you're trying to pull out archival data from Amazon cold storage, suppose for that example, you are charged on a per call basis, right? So if you are not archiving the correct data in the correct place, it is also a concern. So imagine
Yeah.
if you're putting logs of an automation tool that will be scrutinized every month. It's good to okay to be in S3 storage, but imagine those were financial bots, and that's those data has to be archived for your SOC or MIC compliance. They can be put on Amazon cold storage because they will be called once in a year or twice in a year by your regulatory body for checking. So those you have to put in cold storage. So data storage is inexpensive, but if you are not good in your data storage policy and where you store it and how you store it and in what form, it's going to be a pretty expensive affair.
I think that's a valuable insight, and I think though data is a valuable asset or an oil, you need to have proper data management in play and proper technology supporting it, because retrieving data out of various sources is also now becoming like a costly affair. So you touched upon the right points, and with this, I think there are a lot of advancements happening. Like cloud computing coming into play, AI continuing to shape up the industries. How do you include these two in your architecture strategy? Uh, and what is the importance of these two in your architecture strategy?
Yeah. So again, with AI, see again, like with AI coming in, and people call it AI. I call it machine learning. I don't like the cliche of the word AI. It's still machine learning for me. So that's very important, right? Because
Hmm.
generally you see all these large language models. Let's take the example of ChatGPT. It is a simple LLM. And when you are training the data, because this ChatGPT 3.5, 4, whatever you call, they are all trained on public data. But the moment you are absorbing it as an API call, that is fine. But the moment you start training those models on your specific company data, it is very important to ensure that those guardrails are in place, right? Just imagine, right? For example, let's say you have trained your bot to give you some financial reports, which on the data that from your past in your organization, right?
Yeah.
So there is something called an API temperature. So an API temperature, it ranges from 0.1 to 1. So if you put it to 0.1, it will give you a very stable result. If you go it to 1, it will give you more creative results for these large language models. Now, finding out the optimum temperature for that API is also very important, because if you push it to 1 all the time, it will start hallucinating and give you irrelevant results. If you make it too stable and towards 0.1, it might not give you accurate results as well. So I
Yeah.
think those guardrails, legal compliances, etc., you should run it part legal, run it past HR, ensure everything is in order before even venturing into those. So the data you feed is very important. It's like what we put in our body. We eat healthy food, we'll have a long lifespan. We eat a lot of junk food, it is going to end us bad, right? So I think what you feed the AI is very important.
Perfect. So it's garbage in, garbage out. Intelligence in,
Garbage in, garbage out.
intelligence
Intelligence
out.
out.
Perfect. Now, you spoke about the standards and best practices that whilst ingesting AI. Now, how would you use them in your decision-making process as an enterprise architect? What's the role of
Yeah, I
standard and
think
best practices? Yeah.
yeah. I mean, in our real life, right, we always think that forgiveness is better than taking permission, but this doesn't apply to automation world or RPA world or AI world, because there is no margin of error of forgiveness.
Yep.
You damage a brand, it's okay. You're going to get fired. That's a different story altogether. But you hurt the brand so bad that it cannot stand up. So I think essentially any organization, any large organization who has an AI plan should have a digital officer definitely. And for AI, it is good to have an ethical officer as well. So I think that the idea of moraling that AI, or like policing that AI on its morals, is very important. I think stuff like what you're feeding in should go through multiple level of scrutiny. It's going to be tedious, that's fine, but better be safe than sorry. It's like I might stay in a place where there are no thieves or robbers. That's perfectly fine, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't lock my door. So it's better to be safe than sorry. Ensure it goes through multiple levels of scrutiny, both at the HR level, the security level, the legal level. And then I think the easiest way to do it, because an AI is a long-term plan, it's a long-term strategy. Start marking your data. So if you have levels like public, company confidential, secret, top secret, you can divide it in any forms you want. You start labeling the data. So if you have, let's say, a k-means clustering algorithm to identify the data you should pick, or maybe if it's labeled data, it becomes easier for supervised learning, right? Because the data is labeled in that way. Like you said, you are actually structuring or funneling the right data that can be ingested so that the AI can give you definitive output. But if your data is not labeled at the initial base level itself, it's going to be a mess in the long run.
Perfect. Now that's some sort of a guardrail that everybody follows, but yes, essential one to be followed. As you mentioned, if your data labeling and indexing is not in play, then AI is not going to get you the best output, and that's one of the best practices that you have mentioned. Now, just going on to the best practices, I need your view on what is the best practice that one should follow when you are an enterprise architect looking at an entire architecture strategy and design. You could name any top five.
Yeah, I think the first would be, as an enterprise architect, the first and the most paramount is security.
Yep.
Ensure you do your pen testing, okay, at each and every level, both as a user, as a super user. Getting a security in place is very, very important. The second is your robustness and scalability of the solution. Is it scalable? Always imagine that, something bad's going to happen, right? Imagine tomorrow your servers are going to be down. So unless and until you have already forecasted it or you have implemented it as a part of your strategy, because there is a saying, right? If things can go wrong, it will go wrong.
Yes.
So prepare for that. That's important. And the third part would be training your people. Again, you remember that you always need a mentor in your life. I was fortunate to have many, and these people have trained me, and I'm respectful towards them. And you would expect your generations who are coming up nowadays to train them efficiently as well, because the more you give, the more you teach. I think the
Yep.
more the people learn, right? And do clap on their success, because by
Yep.
essentially clapping, you create deepen the lines of your hand. That gives you more fortune, more glory, right? So teach your people well, so they remember you enough that you are gone from the organization at least. And I think the last part would be, or the fifth point would be, the most important point would be ensuring that all of this is documented correctly. I cannot stress much on this, but documentation is super important, like super duper important. Essentially, where you are storing it, because you have to treat them as CIs or configurable items, right? If you see the ITIL framework as well, it tells you that these documents need to be regularly updated. That knowledge base should be accessible to all, so that people are able to understand. Obviously, there should be data classification definitively. Secrets should be masked out, but having those documents in the place easily understandable makes all the difference. Because even if you are planning a good CMDB, configuration management database, and you're trying to identify using an SNMP protocol, you have to map out each individual elements. So imagine if a computer, like, if I think it was ServiceNow, they have a feature called Auto Discover, where it was able to identify all the elements or all the CIs in that network.
Right.
But
Yes.
you cannot do it unless and until it's properly labeled, right? Or
Yep.
identified. Similarly, your documents needs to be properly structured, labeled, meant where it is required, when to invoke, and definitely have a BCP, business continuity plan, because things can go wrong and will go wrong.
And I'm coming to my next question. Why is HA and PCP important in your in your architecture design?
I think HA and DR, or disaster recovery, however you want to call it, or BCP, is very important because, we live in a condition. Imagine, right? This happened. You know about the Ukraine war, what happened in the
Yep.
Ukraine war. Or imagine, even in fact, when I was back in some other FMCG companies as well, there were flash floods. What you are going to do if your data isn't backup? Tons of data is going to get lost.
Yep.
So, like I said, tomorrow you might be walking out on the street, a golf ball might come and hit you. It's going to happen, right? Or there might be a meteorite that's falling. So things will happen. And I think it should be a part. I think people treat HA and DR as optional. That's a very big mistake. Okay, it's there. No, it's a part of integrated structure. Come on, dude.
Absolutely.
Like, when you are creating an architecture, if you don't have an HA and DR, or if you're keeping it as optional, because when you tell that, hey, it's optional, people are going to treat it as optional and not going to give the due diligence or the
Yep.
value to it. And when things go wrong, everything's going to fall apart. All your years of hard work is going to fall apart. So I think your HADR at a site level. So we have something called SRE, right? Site reliability engineering as well. At a site level, at a server level, at a enterprise level, at a different landmass level, it's very important. I think some of my important data that I have done as an enterprise architect, I have archived it at the same landmass and in a different AZ, availability zone as well. So in case even my geo fails, let's say India has some kind of an issue, I'm able to back up to data through a LATAM server or an AFTA server or an
Yeah.
APEX server. So stuff like that, depending on your data quality, data type, it's very important that you have those kind of redundancies in place so that things don't break. And even if they break, you're able to kind of hit a reset button and everything is back online.
Absolutely. I think a lot of insights with this HADR, and you rightly said it gets treated as optional, and when it falls apart, you start blaming the design. But I think that's not the way ahead. And the SRE that you spoke about, and having a geo mapping is also important in setting up an HADR. So listeners, this is critical. if you are into an EA, please push for a HADR or BCP, because that's the basics of enterprise architecture design. And that should be the sixth point, which I think Abhishek, in
Yeah, I
the
mean, I think
entire,
in order
yeah,
to, I think I'll help your fellow community and your listeners out here as well. When you want, see, again, it's the art of convincing. When you
yeah,
go to Steerco to convince about them about an HADR, they might it is an optional cost. But give them this example. HADR is like hiring a bodyguard. You pay them throughout the year. There might be no instances, but if there is an instance of an assault on you, that bodyguard is responsible. So you have to pay that bodyguard any which ways. Also, even though there is not an incident, it's like an insurance, right? So please use this example. I think it might get push your cause.
I think facts. It's like a bodyguard or it's like an insurance, and that too, an health insurance.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
fantastic. Now I'm learning a lot of lessons from you. Okay, but for the listeners, what is the most valuable lesson that you have learned as an EA?
yeah. Again, see, the entire field of IT is a thankless job. The EA is even more thankless. And because see, you design everything, people think that you are the guy sitting in a PPT, drawing lines, creating boxes, but they don't understand how much effort has gone in before that to create those lines and drawings and boxes. It takes years of experience, and a good EA is doesn't happen in a day. It takes a lot of experience, expertise, and especially good mentors. So I think my best suggestion would be that find a mentor. It's very important, and I stress too much on people. Find a mentor and be a mentor. If you Because what will happen is that I hail from a period of bare metal servers, right? Where Citrix virtual machines, all those were there. I found my mentor who taught me a bit of cloud, taught me a bit of EA. Now you are going to get old at some point in time, right? And you this new Gen AI stuff is going to come in. So you find someone to mentor too, because while you teach them, you will get to learn a lot of things as well.
Yeah.
You will clarify your own concepts. So be good, work in silence, let success make the noise.
And I will add one more quality of yours, unlearn to learn. I think that's one thing that you
Yeah,
often keep
yeah.
doing, and that is why it's a pleasure to hear from you and understand the various insights. And that is where I want to take this opportunity and ask you that if you have to advise the aspiring enterprise architects who are trying to build a successful career in this role, what would that be?
Hey, a certification like a TOGAF or a Zachman or Archimate will give you, yeah, will probably give you a decent salary hike, give you a label, a certificate ID that you are an enterprise architect. But trust me, unless and until you get your hands dirty, you're not going to make it. So essentially, do something. Uh, Learn a lot of system design. Imagine any new tool coming up in the market, any new software as a service coming up in the market. Understand how a CDN works, content delivery network. What are the different types of CDN? How is the data structure coming? What is data structure algorithms? How are the data being streamed to you? What are the services? What are the essential building blocks? Because the more you learn about system design, the more, and just you need do not pay anyone. You need not buy any certificates. You need not go to Udemy or do anything or stuff like that. All you need to do is go hit YouTube, like system design, and give the tool or the name of its choice. You will learn about that tool, right? And how it was built. So
Mhm.
essentially, you can take those best practices and then build it into your diagrams while you are creating one. And like I said, always prepare for BCP, HA, and DR. Create multiple conceptual diagrams and
Yeah,
then finalize the logical and the architecture and the network diagram.
physical
So conceptual
architecture.
architecture should have multiple copies because you should be ready to switch in at a moment's notice.
Last question of this podcast. Where do you see enterprise architecture as a role in next 5 to 10 years?
This is this is something very interesting, and I would be very proud. There are two jobs in the IT field that will never be replaced. The first is a sales, yeah, that's a very human art, and the second are enterprise architects. You're always going to need them, no matter what. You might be hailing from any field, doing any specializing on any applications. But remember, an enterprise architect has the overview from a business perspective, from a solution perspective, and this is a job you cannot replace. You cannot go to Google, or you cannot go to a chat GPT and type, hey, create me an enterprise architecture diagram with this. No, it's not going to happen. So generative AI, be it Wally, be it Midjourney, or be it Stable Diffusion, they're not going to be able to create this, what we do. So our job is secure. It's going to be secure. Maybe you're going to be paid a bit less, but that's okay. But as long as we're going to have more jobs. So that's good enough for me.
I think you were spot on. Gen AI cannot create documentation. Mid Journey cannot create beautiful images, and there is something with PPTs also. But even that cannot create PPTs, because these conceptual diagrams are something which is stored here, and with years of practice, it comes out beautiful with lot of ifs and buts, and as well a beautiful HATR and CP. I think Abhishek, you have added, I would say, a lot of insights, lot of knowledge today. I have learned a lot today, and totally appreciate you giving me your time. I am grateful for this session with you, and I will look forward for more catch-ups. Till then, I will wish you a lot of luck and happiness. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you, Shripad, for having me again. It was a pleasure as well. More than happy. You have been, and again, this is very important, right? I mean, you are giving back to the community, and this is what I appreciate. I mean, you do this podcast. I think people are going to learn a lot. This is very important because sometimes, to be very honest, all these big award ceremonies and functions, they don't tell you the story of the people like us who sits behind the desk, get the jobs done. I think you are representing a community of people who sit behind their desk, get the jobs done, but not at the celebration of the function ceremonies to get awards. So thank you for representing us. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure as well. Wish you and all your viewers and listeners a huge success. Thank you.